This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, hello everyone. Today is Monday, January 31st, 2022. This is the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to SIG Network. This is a CNCF certified meeting, so please be nice to each other and yeah, let's have a productive meeting today. So welcome back everyone. It's actually the first time we've met since the new year, even though we're a month into it. Hope everyone's year is going well so far. We can go ahead and roll right into it. I see the FQDN policy folks are going to propose some of their thoughts to SIG Network in the upcoming meeting. Do you want to go in a little more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think last year near the end, we discussed the FQDN selector a little bit in this meeting. And basically what I'd like to do is this coming SIG Network meeting, just take that idea as it currently stands to SIG Network, get a broad up-down on whether we're okay putting FQDN support into upstream Kubernetes. I think that's like the bare minimum support that I think we need from SIG Network to get together a CAP and really hash out the details of this. If we can get more clarifications on should we add it to the existing API, should we make a new object, we can obviously dive into that. But just having a up down on yes, people are okay with us adding FQDN support would be a good starting point. We can start iterating on the CAP and take things from there. So yeah, to that end, I guess I wanted to run through the proposal once more with the group, just point out a few things that I've added or changed since we last talked about it, get any pieces of feedback, things I should be sure to mention when we talk to SIG Network, just general open to comments situation.
Cool. Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. I gave you the ability to share just now.
Awesome.
And as we go, I definitely, I think I have a little more insight now after been grinding on the AMP CAP for the past couple of weeks as to what's going to be possible. But at the end of the day, I do think it's really smart to go ahead and take it to SIG Network earlier rather than later at this point. So.
Hey, so real quick question, Rahul, is this thing added to the agenda for this Thursday? I don't know if you're responding, you might be on mute.
It is on the agenda.
Oh, for
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait, sorry, no, it's not.
It's not on the SIG Network agenda. I need to add that there.
Yeah, let's do that.
Can you see my screen or did that go away?
No, I cannot see it.
Okay, let me try this again.
There you go. But somehow you're losing your audio when you share your screen, I think.
Yeah, it's really.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
and
I got you.
Hopefully see what I'm doing. All right, perfect. Yeah, so this is the doc that we've been just sort of going back and forth on. The first up is Andrew, you made a valid call for user stories. So I sketched out a couple here. They're fairly basic, but I think they're a decent starting point. We can see if people have any other ideas. At this point, I'm targeting a persona that is sort of an application developer or a namespace owner. So very analogous to the network policy owners that we kind of currently have today. This would be a namespace concept for the time being. And the idea is you want to specify some egress endpoints for your workload, but you don't want to manage a list of IP blocks. It's easier to read and understand FQDN policies. So that's sort of one basic use case that we're targeting. Another one is sort of a variant of this. I've heard a couple customers complain, especially about IPv6 addresses being a little bit chunky and unwieldy, and them preferring to have FQDNs instead of that. So that's just really a subplot of the first user story, but just fleshing that out. Story 3 is an interesting one, and I anticipate a decent amount of conversation here. This feeds into the idea of sort of wildcard specifiers. This is something that I have run into in terms of customer use cases, but it's not, we can talk through what we want to do about this in open source. The idea being that there's a whole suite of APIs or endpoints that you want to allow, whether it's your on-prem network, it's your cloud providers, set of APIs. Those are just a couple of examples, but the idea being that you want to say star.mycloudprovider.io or star.myonpremnetwork.com or something like that. You want to be able to allow list a huge chunk of FQDNs without having to explicitly lay them out one by one. So this is another use case. In this case, it would have to be with a wildcard specifier. So these are some user stories that I've added right now. Obviously, an open call to anyone. If you don't have access to edit this doc, let me know. Please go ahead and add more as you think of them or as they come up. But any questions or concerns about these right off the bat?
First of all, I think story 3 has a lot of merit. I've seen that before as well. So that's really great. Story 2, I don't know if it warrants being its own user story, because like FQDN should be fully talking about layers above IPv6, right? So like for this proposal, all that matters, like we don't care what's behind the FQDN name, right? Like it seems like it's a layer lower.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I can just call out that we would like to support IPv4 and IPv6 as a part of this.
Yeah.
No special treatment, ideally, for either address style.
Totally. That's kind of what I was thinking. Like at the end of the day, I mean, it's not true layer 7 because any implementation would just be translating to IPs. So I don't think it really matters. You could have a story that says like, as an application developer, I want to avoid typing in complex addresses or something along those lines. But
right.
Cool. Yeah, I think these user stories are good so far. I'll think on if I can of any others. I can't off the top of my head. I like that it's a narrow scope. That should help in SIGNet. I will say I can really easily see this being rolled into an egress firewall object rather than there's just this really narrowed scope set of user stories. But we can talk a little bit more about that as we continue.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so that's sort of a good segue into the API proposals. And this is where we can present these to SIG Network, but I doubt we'll get any sort of resounding consensus here. There's a lot to dig into. But broadly speaking, these haven't changed since we last talked about them. As a recap for those who weren't there, there's 2 ideas we're kicking around right now. One is to enhance the existing network policy spec, like the we would probably add like a V1 alpha 1 or something to that effect. And we want to add FQDNs as a subfield into that. The thinking behind this being that it's the one-stop shop for writing boundaries around your workloads today. It's easier for users to understand and discover and use properly if it's all in one object rather than having to compose policies across various different objects. To that end, I think there's a little bit of discussion around exactly where we would add this in the policy spec. I'm currently proposing a new sort of top level field in the spec itself called egress FQDNs. And we use the policy types array here as a mechanism for failing closed and allowing older CNIs to just, restrict traffic carte blanche without having to really dig into the details of the egress FQDN policy. And so this is something that I've detailed a little bit here under the section failing closed on how old CNIs would still parse these policies safely. The alternative, oh, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I think the doc is not focusing on the API. It's still showing the egress.
Okay, let me.
Oh yeah, right. It works now.
Okay, here we go. I think I was pausing sharing instead of pausing the audio share. It's a little bit tricky. All right. Yeah, so sorry. The API that I'm describing is here of adding a top level egress FQDN. We have a section on failing closed, which sort of explains how we would handle this in older CNIs. And then there's a couple of options in terms of alternatives of extending the existing spec, either adding it to the network policy peer struct alongside IP block and namespace selector, pod selector there, or adding it to the network policy egress rule. With the network policy peer, the trouble that I'm having is that the semantics of an empty network policy don't seem to be fully called out in the API definition. It's just not explicitly defined, which at this point means that CNIs may choose to interpret it how they will. So an older CNI, they wouldn't see the new FQDN field; they just see an empty object, and it's unclear how that would behave. They might just fail open, allowing all traffic, which would not be ideal. It's a similar problem with the network policy egress rule struct, which is basically that we have a list of two specifiers. An empty list or a missing list means allow all egress traffic, so it would basically fail open. So if we were to add a new struct there, that's definitely a non-starter. We would just be failing open for existing traffic. So that's the pitch for how we might enhance the existing network policy object. Are there any questions or discussions or things to clarify here?
I like it. I think it's really smart adding the extra list. It's a little bit verbose, right? But in terms of adding another feature to network policy, you're going to have to be, especially for upstream to even consider it, right? But I at first glance, I think, well, I guess I've looked at this before. I do like it. I think on Thursday in your presentation, like really just zero in on explaining to people how it fails close, because that's something that's hard for a lot of folks to understand, and it will be like the number one question, right? So I think you've done a really good job of describing it here, but maybe even just throw together like a slide or two and explain it that way. And I mean, if you can get a few people on board, it would definitely be the easiest way to get this work merged, is just adding it to network policy. So
right, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll probably have a slide or two very specifically to this. That's a good call out.
And we can now, supposedly we can bring back like V1. We could bring back V1 alpha. We could like make a V1 alpha 2 for networking API. So that kind of helps there as well.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. Any other thoughts or concerns? Piece of feedback. All right. Yeah. So this is proposal 1, enhance the existing network policy object. Proposal 2 is to add a new resource, something like an FQDN policy, which we'd take from V1 alpha 1 all the way through, but it would be a separate policy object that it looks very similar to network policy. You've got a pod selector describing which workloads you're targeting. In this case, it just has an egress specifier because we're not interested in ingress at this point in time. And then the guts of the specification are still the same thing as what we're asking for in the first proposal. You have a list of matches, list of ports, and you sort of build out the cross product, pretty similar to how network policy works today. Yeah, I mean, this one it's tricky because now you're adding another place that users need to configure stuff, and then if they ever want to debug, hey, why is this traffic being allowed or being rejected? You have to check two places. It's a little bit more fraught, a little bit more error prone. That's this thought around this new policy object. Anything folks want to call out here? This is, I guess, where the can of worms opens around just having an entire egress firewall resource or stuff like that. This is where we can really scope creep on this.
Yeah, there's two problems too, right? So if you scroll, I had read Dan Winship's firewall cap, and he makes a good point. Like really with FQDN, a whitelist model is the way to go, right? So that is another rationale for it to fit nicely into network policy, and not to fit into an egress firewall sort of policy, because that would more likely be geared towards the admin, I would imagine, right? And in this proposal, you're more focused on the developer, right?
Exactly.
That might be another push towards one. I guess, I don't know. It really, at this point, after working with them for a while, anything's possible. It's just like, who can you get the most people to raise their hands and say, we're going to help push this through?
Right.
The problem I foresee is you might get a lot of yells for network policy v2. Because what we've heard, at least what I've heard, Yang might be able to correlate this in the past couple weeks of really intensely working on admin network policy, is we are kind of done with network policy. We don't want to open any more cans of worms with network policy. It is already too complicated. Let's leave it where it is and move forward. Do you kind of agree that's the sentiment we've gotten, Yang?
Yeah, totally.
So what do you do, Raul, if they're if they come back with okay, this needs to be built in a network policy v2? I mean,
yeah, I don't really know what the game plan there is. I mean, I by my understanding, network policy v2 conversations are non-existent at this point. They're wherever we left them some odd months back.
They were run by a few folks from Jupyter, and the last time I looked, I think Jupyter closed their some part of their open source community, so I haven't heard for a long time about that. So yeah, pretty much dead.
So Andrew, you bring up a very important question, right? So whether we want to put it in the network policy or not. We went back and forth, and I think as everyone is pointing out, there's not enough appetite to continue to extend network policy. So I think the time has come for us to come up with the network policy v2. But in the time it takes for us to the network policy v2, we agree on what the scope is. By the time it comes out, what do we do in the meantime? So I think what we are suggesting is instead of, since there's so much pushback on trying to extend the network policy, we said let's do through FQDN, and so that way, for customers who are aware of this, they want to use it, they can easily make it work with network policy. So that was the intent. Because right now we've gotten ourselves into a situation where we can't make progress on either front because everything is stalled because it's network policy suite. I think we've been talking about it for a year at least, right? So
yeah, no one's picked it up. I mean, I would love to, and that's kind of my next object. But Yang and I have been pretty full to the gills on cluster scope policy for a long time now. Now there is a third avenue. So we still have that repo we haven't used at all. So, well, a few things here. Admin network policy is firstly going to be implemented as a CRD. Technically, we could go ahead and agree on an API and prototype that and have it upstream as a CRD in our SIG network policy API repo as part of the policy API group, because it's an API group owned by us. It's not officially in Tree, I don't believe. And we could do some stuff up there. That might be a way for us to get kind of fast and dirty on getting something that people can use. And then as we move down the road, we could look at actually like getting a CAP formally approved. Now I need to talk to Tim and SIG Network and make sure that that's not like egregious.
Let's put that thing as a proposal and see what happens. So if I hear you right, Andrew, what you're saying is not pursue FQDN. I mean, the one of the proposals that you're suggesting, not pursue FQDN CRD, but like make it part of the admin network policy.
No, not necessarily admin network policy yet. Like, so if we were going to pursue a new CRD, we would have to make a new object for FQDN just as a start. To be honest, in my opinion, I would love to toss this into network policy, and I will help push for that. But I just have a very strong feeling after conversations we've had with Tim, especially like in the past 2 weeks, that he's going to shut it down. I don't know if you all have had conversations about that, but
I mean, he's aware of it. He's been commenting on the doc, but we haven't. Did he comment anything at all, Rahul, on the?
He did comment on it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I had a conversation with him that was in a similar vein about, where does the community draw the line on, we don't want to take this in Tree. He didn't have any strong, decisive guidelines at that point in time. The indication I got from him was that FQDN was right on the border of, we've been talking about it for a while. It's not, in some sense, a massive change to the behavior. It can be thought of as an incremental improvement depending on your perspective. So I think his stance was he's okay with it. He'd like to hear if anyone else in the community has strong opinions against it. But that was a few months back, so he may have changed his opinion since then.
We've really outlined that. I'm starting to think about it more. Like we had some folks pushing for V2, they kind of dropped out. Now we have this desire for the new feature FQDN. We also have a pretty concrete list of qualms with network policy V1. We know what it does well, we know what it doesn't do well. If they come back with, well, this should be network policy V2, why don't we start building a network policy V2 with a narrow scope, more focused on FQDN? And if folks like start coming out of the community and actually calling for features, maybe those features won't be in alpha, but we can build them into beta. The key will be as long as we build the base API to be extensible, right? That was the problem with network policy. Like, it was not built to fail closed. And we're seeing with at least admin network policy, we're almost there. And I think I can speak for Yang and I, like, we feel like it's built to be extensible. Like, we feel like we could easily, if we were focusing on north-south traffic, add FQDN as a selector, as a peer. I mean, it wouldn't be rocket science.
So this is by using a status field?
Not even.
I mean, how would you know if, like, for example, a implementation does not implement the FQDN, then how would it silently fail?
We basically have added a layer of indirection and a strict enforcement that within that layer of indirection, there's a list of selectors, and only one selector can be set for a given rule. Mm-hmm. And so if the implementation sees an empty selector set, it just does nothing. Doesn't allow, doesn't deny, it fails closed, right? It interprets nothing from emptiness. And that's kind of how the API is built. There's a little more notes on the AMP cap as well that is directly related to that. But what I'm saying is, right now, if we go to them, they say no to adding the network policy, then let's build network policy V2, but let's make it super simple for now. Like, let's make it fix what we don't like about network policy V1 and add FQDN selector.
Mhm.
And that's
Okay.
it, unless people come in to help, right? Or unless we have community involvement, right?
Right.
So I think,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
because then it's not a total reboot. It's not all this work on you guys to totally remake network policy v2. It's more of let's reform network policy v1, make it extensible, add FQDN, move forward.
So
Right.
actually, that was the original intention when we were talking about it. So what we'll do is that right now, based on the conversation that we have had so far with all the folks, our focus is trying to get the FQDN feature out because we have pending customers who are looking for it. So having said that, let's see what the SIG network has to say. And if they insist on doing network policy, then we'll have to go back and make some adjustments on our side. But otherwise, we will push for. I mean, we'll ask their opinion. Let's say, like, at least the authors of this CAP are leaning towards FQDN being a separate CRD. And see, and if they come back and said no, go back, and then we will talk about it, saying that we did discuss, and there was, like, like, some folks who are advocating that we should put it in network policy and see what they have.
Yeah, and the only piece of advice I'll say for that is get the meeting recording, make sure you have it, and take good notes so that you don't end up having the same conversation with SIG Network 4 times.
Yeah.
That was a common pitfall we've had.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But
So, yeah,
I really like what you've put together here. I think it's good work. I wish I could give solid answers, but I'm not the boss, right? So
No, absolutely. But no, these are very valid, good points.
One quick question I have on the technical side. I think I'm maybe slipping a little bit when you were talking about the two proposals you had in terms of adding this into the network policy v1 API. And one is adding this to appear, and the other is adding this to the egress rules, right? So, oh, okay, cool. So the proposal one, okay, I think I'm talking about the proposal one here. So
Yeah.
how was egress FQDN's, this proposal one not fitting close? Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so the idea behind how it's going to fail closed is that we have the policy types field right now,
Right.
which can be either ingress or egress.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that right now what we can do is we'll add a defaulting layer that basically when the API server sees an egress FQDNs field, it populates policy types with egress. And so for old CNIs, what they'll see is they'll see a policy type of egress, and they'll see an empty list for the actual egress.
I see. So sorry to interrupt, but
No
what if we don't go that route? What if we say that, okay, because this is a new feature, in our policy, you can get away with, just specifying a bunch of ingress rules and not saying the policy type being ingress, because that's something that's really implicit, right? So a CNI should know how to interpret that implicitly, because you only provide an ingress rule and there's no egress rule. But what if we do something like, okay, FQDN is a new feature, right? So if you provide egress FQDN as a bunch of rules, we mandate that people specify in the policy type, which says this is a new type, maybe something called egress FQDN, right? So instead of ingress and egress, we explicitly provide a new type to the policy type. And an old CNI will look at this type and don't know what to do because it's an egress FQDN and they don't know what to do with it. So we explicitly separating egress and egress FQDN to essentially mean different things. And there's no sort of like intertwining with each other, not even in the policy types. Would that make things a little bit easier?
That's a interesting point. I'm thinking about what that.
Actually, would you mind adding that text to that, Yang? Because I think that's definitely a work. A proposal that maybe add a proposal 3, I guess, or like a proposal 1.
Okay, yeah, I can.
But I think Yang, I think, but I don't think it will make it any better. I mean,
okay.
The reason is if you add a new policy type, they will not be able to see it anywhere, right? I mean, because they are old CNI. So they won't be able to make decisions based on the new policy type. Because
I that's a point. That's a good point. I wanted to say this because I've been working on entry as a CNI, and I can definitely not speak for the other CNIs, but as far as I remember, in Entria, there's some processing we do with our policies. So the first thing we do is that if people in the spec actually provided explicitly a policy type, whether it's ingress, egress, or ingress and egress, then we know immediately what to do with the policy because people has explicitly provided this value, right? So now we know that maybe ingress needed to be locked up only for the ingress rules, the things allowed in the ingress rules, and for the egress that's the same thing, right? But there are a lot of cases. I think when people actually write network policies, they have the tendency to actually just skip this policy type field. So now it comes to the CNI implementation to actually interpret this for them, right? So if people just provided the ingress rules and not actually specify the egress in the network policy spec, now the CNI would know to just basically put the ingress tag onto this policy. So essentially,
yeah, I agree with that. But I think the policy, I definitely agree with your argument that like specifying the policy type will explicitly will actually make the CNI provider's life very easy. I would feel that, I mean, for egress network policy, the policy type, I mean, we can just retain the existing policy type, which is egress. So if policy type is not specified, then the CNI provider will not react to it.
Well,
But
so
I think,
just quickly before we go down, as far as I understand it, based on the documentation, the API server will default a value for policy types if it's not specified. So before any CNI even gets a hold of this policy type, the API server, because this is a built-in type, will inspect it and fill in appropriate values into that string anyhow. That seems to be what's indicated in the API reference.
all right, then in that case, my memory would actually maybe serving me wrong. So that's also a good indication that a CNI, when they receive the policy, they should inspect the policy type at the first thing, as the first thing, right? Before they even actually go into looking at the path selectors and whatnot. Logically speaking, when they got a policy and the policy pops into the reconciler or the controller or whatnot, the first thing they should do is they should look at the policy type. So the policy type is where we essentially inform the CNI. Now, Satish, I understand your point being, because if we introduce egress FQDN as a new policy type, the CNI might not even know what to do with that, right? So in CNIs, they may have a switch statement, maybe saying case ingress do what, and case egress do blah blah blah. They might not have a default for something policy type they don't understand. That I understand this might be a problem. Yes, so I guess this might just be a tricky thing that we needed to take into consideration, because I know the policy type only came into being because there was something in the similar lines when egress
support egress.
Yeah, when egress
Just
rules of
egress
network policy were added, because they wanted to avoid exactly the situation like this, they have added the policy types. So my understanding would be, it should be reasonable to let CNIs know that they should be inspecting the policy types and only accept or only process policy types that they can understand. and not just go ahead and do some I don't know if that's a safe thing to say, but that my point being, if we add a new policy type, there should be some mechanism for them to know that this is something that I don't understand, I cannot proceed with. But I don't know if that's a safe assumption to make. But anyways, but I think there will be definitely a lot safer than basically putting egress as a reuse egress as a policy type for this, because that would definitely confuse CNIs, OCNIs. That's for sure.
So what do you so Yang, what do you mean by confusing the CNIs? Because I mean, if they're behind in the API, I mean, they won't see the spec at all. So they will treat us as if it's an empty network policy, right? I mean,
yes. So here's what I think. If let's say you have FQDN rules, and the policy type is egress. Now the CNI will look at the spec and says, okay, this is an egress policy. Now it goes into the egress rules, which found it empty, right? Now CNI would interpret this as user has supplied me a egress policy which has no egress rules in it, which means lock everything down or allow anything or whatnot, right? Basically the default behavior if there's no rule provided. And that's not what we wanted. What we want is that a CNI look at the policy type and realize, hey, this is an egress type that I don't know. And then they report an error or do whatever they do like in the CNI processing, and not just interpret it as
the benefit of interpreting it as an egress is that an egress type policy where no egress rules are specified is very explicitly defined as being deny all. So that has the side effect of just shutting down all egress traffic,
right?
Which I would argue in this case is good, because at the very least we're not allowing any traffic that users don't want out. Maybe it might be inconvenient for users because now they'll be rejecting all traffic and they'll have to go dig into why this is happening. But since we don't have any established mechanisms for CNIs to really report, hey, I don't know what to do with this, right? We don't have a status field. We have no way of really surfacing this to the user in any sort of meaningful sense. I personally believe, and we can definitely debate this, I think there's valid arguments for both sides. I think it makes sense to just shut everything down and have users come in and realize that their CNI doesn't know what to do with this, rather than letting us fall through potentially undefaulted switches.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a great point. I think I'll try to add a section here and maybe tag you, see if you can make sure that whatever it makes sense, and add any context links.
Sure, but I mean, this is to be honest, this is not like I don't see this as a proposal. I don't see all of these are a good way to add this into the V1. So the better way definitely is to create something from scratch so that we don't have to deal with the things that we didn't do right for the network policy V1. But I'm just trying to think if there's any chance that we might be squeezing something into V1 and not worry about adding a completely new different resource.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that if we do try to add this as an egress policy type, what Yang said, I do want to second that. Failing clause on for the egress default rule might sound okay, but I think as from a user's perspective, it's a pain. If I have services which were working fine, and after applying a policy, all of a sudden things stop working, in that namespace or in multiple namespaces, it's going to be a pain. So the user experience is probably not going to be good, and I think even for the CNI, it might be hard to figure that out, like why things stop working. So I just want to second that. But if we can find a way which does not degrade the user's experience, I think that'd be better.
So,
Yeah,
but I
that's good
think it depends
I-
on the. Yeah, so one point here, like, I mean, it depends on the CNI provider implementation, right? If they don't care about like the policy types, they would, even if I send egress NAT in the policy type, they might still implement default deny. So, I mean, it really depends on the CNI provider and how they're actually implementing the policies.
Yeah, I feel like the trade-off here is between it being a pain to users and it being potentially like a security problem. The benefit of feeling closed is that someone will realize something's gone wrong immediately and be able to roll back and debug. If you fail silently, which is basically what's going to happen if you add a new type, then sure, all the traffic that was going on before will continue to go. But until you send out bad traffic and test that it gets denied, you won't realize anything's gone wrong. Which, I mean, you know, I think that's
I agree from the security perspective, and I think that we should find a way which fails close, or rather, we should find a way which I don't know if there's a better way around this, but definitely I agree that if it's between user experience versus security, then we should give the security a higher precedence. But if we can we find a way which eases both of those concerns? If there's no proposal which solves, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, via network policy v2.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, well, I do think that's a little, I would bring it to SIGNet as the proposal stands, honestly, in my mind. I think they would respond better to an explicitly fail closed. But for now, we can always debate the API a little bit later. And trust me, it will undergo many iterations, I'm sure. But I think you have your head totally right on your shoulders. I like the way it's going, and it's going to force SIGNet to set a precedent for us in moving forward. And regardless, whether it's a longer way to us getting new features in or a shorter way, at least we will be able to get new features in. We've chipped away some of that with admin network policy, and I think this will kind of close the book, especially for the developer persona. So I'm excited. Thanks for doing this work. Let's hope it goes well on Thursday.
Awesome.
Sound good?
Thanks. Yeah. I'll put together a presentation and share it with folks if they want to provide comments. But yeah, hopefully this goes well Thursday.
Sweet. Yeah, and just throw a note on the agenda. I'll go ahead and do that so that you're like at the top of the agenda.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks so much, Earl. It's awesome. Glad to see some more interest here. In the last few minutes, I just want to give a quick update on AMP. Basically, we are in the final stages of KEP review, pushing really hard to get the KEP merged by Thursday, which is the KEP deadline. So if you want to check, I'm not going to run through everything that's changed because a lot has changed. But if you would like to see what has changed in the API, the KEP is pretty much up to date. Yang, I did see that the PRR reviewer just gave some comments as well, like 20 minutes ago. So that's good news for us. Is there anything else we should hash out while we're on this call around admin network policy?
Yeah, the priority numbering issue, right?
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. So just to fill everyone in, we've been arguing almost, well, not internally, actually. Yang, I think we've all been in agreement, but whether or not one is the highest priority or the lowest priority. And now it seems to have wanted to be flipped again.
But
I don't know.
I left this out intentionally on Friday because I was trying to address every other comments that Tim had on there. But this one, I do get a sense that there are other people, I know Casey included, didn't like the way that we put 0 as a special case for the priorities. But if we do actually flip things around, I think 1 being the highest precedence and blah blah blah, and we keep 0 as the default will be really really weird, which doesn't really make sense anymore. So I guess we definitely needed to find a better, if we do wanted to flip this, we definitely need to rethink about the baseline problem again, which I really don't know what to do at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know if I agree with you on that. Like if 1 was the highest precedence, the most important value, it's a little more explicit now that 0 is special, right? Because it's kind of furthest away from its closest priority. I know it's a little harsh, but it's more explicit, I would say. Like it truly is special now, right?
I see.
I see what you mean, though. I don't know. I don't know if Tim said that saying I'm not going to merge it because of this, or if he said it as oh, I went and looked and everyone else does it this way, so we should too. I mean, the only
Were we
way.
asked to?
Sorry, go ahead.
Were we asked to do some sort of a poll in the community or send an email to get a response?
At one point, yeah, but I made the executive call assuming we didn't have enough time to do that before and get responses before this deadline on Thursday. That was like a week or 2 ago.
I remember.
So we're here now. The quickest way forward would just be to go ahead and flip it, leave 0 as a special, and see what happens, move on. The only other way I can think to remove ambiguity around making 0 a special flavor of policy is to add a Boolean or something, right? Or add like an extremely explicit Boolean, which stinks because it's just another switch to configure. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know who the the other Casey is. Do you actually know him? Because
yeah, he's from Red Hat.
Okay.
I have actually been talking to him about some of this today.
Okay.
Did he comment on that bit as well?
Yeah, he did. He says he would be okay with regular rules are priority from 1 to 1,001 being the most important one, and we signal that 0 is a special value, essentially. So
okay,
let's do that. I think that's the most least resistant path forward.
Yeah, if we have, I didn't see Casey had commented. I think that's approval enough for me from the community to move forward with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess right now maybe let's do that. I do have a pull request. I think I saw you have a couple of comments, and I do think the comments are about there are other things that we should have fixed in addition to that. It's not about what I have fixed so far, right? If I'm not mistaken. So I guess to me, I feel like a good way might be that we merge this PR first, and then you can maybe do another PR on top of that just to add to it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Or
Or
I'm pulling up your PR right now. I did that this morning. I would just go, there was only a few things, and what I do is I literally have your changes on one screen and their comments on the other. And there was just like 2 comments. Okay, yeah, there was 2 little comments and then one about the naming of the L4 selector that they didn't like.
Right.
I probably, if I were you, just go ahead and fix those little comments in that PR, and let's talk a little bit about the naming for L4 selector now, because I think that was the last big thing beyond the priorities.
Okay. Sure.
Right. I mean, it'd be easier if we could just get all the comments addressed in your PR.
Yeah, sure.
Unless you want to just finish it up with Tim.
Wait, sorry.
Just that.
I'm my internet is a little bit choppy right now. What did you just say?
It might be mine too. Sorry.
No worries.
I just said, if you want to go ahead and finish, just respond to the comments and Bella Mary in a different.
Is it just me, or is it everybody else that not hearing you?
Let me see. Is that any better?
But I mean, anyways, I think if I understand you correctly, Andrew, is that I can basically fix what we just update the PR as what we had just said. Basically have the priorities, 1 being the highest precedence and 0 being special case, and we do the other renaming part for the L4 selectors, and I can just update the PR with those things, and we should be good to go, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yes. So what are we gonna do about the L4 selector? I'm sorry if you can't hear.
For the L4 selectors, I think I do see a comment from the other Casey this morning saying that we might want to do something like ports, and I think what he did was propose a new sort of way to do the all ports thing. I guess we probably needed to take another look for that as well. Let me try to ping that comment down.
What was this L4 selector part? Which comment is this?
So essentially we added a new L4 selector. This is because Tim was saying that we didn't want it to do the same thing as network policy, where an empty ports means all ports, because you didn't specify anything, and they want us to be very explicit, so that in addition to what we specify for the path selectors or namespace selector or whatnot, every peer should have a port explicitly defined. And the original proposal for him was to explicitly list out everything if we wanted to allow it from all ports. So basically for every peer, you needed to do like ports, TCP, 1 to 63,000, blah, 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 and UDP and SCTP or whatever you can think of. And we're saying, no, this is not the way to go, because that would be too extremely weirdly verbose. And a lot of people don't actually even care about L4. They just care about L3. And they just wanted, to select peers and expect this to work on all possible port and numbers. So we come up with this L4 selector, which is the thing that now you have to specify along with maybe pos selectors and namespace vectors. And we provided a enum called all ports, which makes it a little bit easier for people to just select all ports if that's what they want. And if they don't actually want to select all ports, if they are just caring about specific ports like 80 or 443 or something, they have to explicitly put that in the use selector essentially. But we are still maybe debating on how to do this exactly. I see Tim just responded. Andrew just pointed out. Let's see.
Hey, Yang, can you hear me better now?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. So I was just saying, Tim just responded 6 minutes ago to this, so I have it up on the screen. Can y'all see it?
Yes.
Cool. So let's see what he said. Yeah, you put into words exactly what I had said in this. Oops, sorry, in this comment above. Tim. Wildcards are a little scary, but.
Yeah, we're running out of names to name fields.
It's because we've become extremely explicit in the world.
This is interesting. Yeah, I didn't see this.
What about?
So I take the mayor, meaning that he didn't even like what he wrote about the second one, because the second one is the closest to our original proposal. Yeah, we just wanted a different word for ports on the second level, right? Essentially.
Well, it's not even that. We wanted a different word. Yeah, a different word for ports on that top hierarchy.
Do you guys consider like L4 ports or policy ports for the top level? I don't know, it's redundant.
I don't think he liked the word L4. That's the problem.
No. What about? I mean, I thought policy
Yang,
ports.
what if we have? Why don't we just update the API for admin network policy port, and instead of adding like an extra layer, just have an all ports field within admin network policy port, and we say if that field is set, none of the others can be set. Like, isn't that the same concept? Does that make sense?
I think that's a little weird to validate because that's a list. So if you have one part with all ports and then another list item with some without the all ports, I don't know how much sense that would make.
Fair enough.
Let's just pick one, I guess, and then continue as Tim has suggested. And if we find a better name, we comment and we update it.
Well, if I have to pick, I'll pick the second one that he just made. but you know, it to me.
Yeah, because that would be the easiest to update too.
Yes, that to me that works. It's just that the naming isn't really sounding great. But this works, right? It's just.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just pick the second one. Let's throw that in and see what you know the.
Not to pour like more confusion on this, but I guess the second one says that you if you say all ports, you're also saying all, like it's all ports and all protocols, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. There, we don't want a way to say TCP everything, but UDP only.
So if
something
you
else.
wanted to do something like that, you'd have to go with the list way. So the all ports is just like a sugar for people to get around when they don't really care about L4. When you wanted to specify some ports for a specific protocol, you're not actually not caring about L4. You do care about L4. Now you have to go to the very explicit way to basically list out everything you wanted to allow for ports and protocols. You cannot just do sugar anymore. So that's our original reasoning for this.
That's fair enough. That makes sense.
And you can still do that, Raul. You would just have to specify a port with a port range that's super wide. So like then it's still explicit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
So
like number 4 down there.
Range,
right. Yeah. 1 to 65,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do need to hop off. Yang, I think that's a good idea. If you get that updated, I'm actually going to be working pretty late tonight, so I'll get it looked at and probably merge tonight. And then I will, I guess, push another PR to address John Bellameric's comments. He's the production readiness review approver. So he had a couple comments as well.
Okay, sure. I'll fix what you have commented there, and I'll incorporate this and the other powered conversation into my PR, and I'll ping you when I'm done.
Okay, well, we are almost there. Thanks everyone so much for the help. The last little bit on that KEP is I think Gobin still hasn't signed the CLA. Like if it comes down to it, I'm just gonna punt his commit from the KEP because I don't think that commit is even relevant anymore. So yeah. I'll give him till tomorrow afternoon to do it, or I'm just gonna get CI green on the KEP because I don't want that to block us.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Cool. Okay, we're down to the wire. Thanks so much for all the help. Thanks so much for everyone coming today. It was a really productive meeting. And let's see how things go this week. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.